There's something unsettling about walking into a perfectly curated space, the kind of home where every book finds its place, where colors speak to each other in gentle whispers, where light falls just so across thoughtfully chosen objects. We feel exposed, as if our own chaos has been illuminated by someone else's harmony. This discomfort isn't about the space itself, it's about what that space reveals about us. When we encounter intentional beauty, we're confronted with a question we'd rather avoid. What does our own environment say about the state of our inner world? Look around you right now. How many surfaces are cluttered with objects that have no real home? How many corners have become graveyards for things we meant to deal with later? How many spaces in your life feel more like storage units than sanctuaries? The truth is that our external environment serves as a precise barometer of our internal state. When we allow chaos to reign in our physical spaces, we're training our minds to accept chaos as normal. We're teaching ourselves that we don't deserve beauty, that order is somehow beyond our reach, that caring about aesthetics is frivolous. But what if the opposite is true? What if the discipline required to create and maintain beautiful spaces is actually one of the most practical investments we can make in our mental health and overall well-being? Modern neuroscience confirms what philosophers have long suspected. Our brains are constantly processing visual information from our environment, even when we're not consciously aware of it. A cluttered, chaotic space creates a constant, low-level stress response. Our cognitive resources are depleted, trying to make sense of visual disorder, leaving less mental energy available for creativity, focus, and emotional regulation. Conversely, spaces that are thoughtfully organized and aesthetically pleasing actually restore mental energy. They reduce cortisol production, enhance concentration, and promote the release of neurotransmitters associated with well-being and calm. The resistance we feel toward creating beautiful spaces often masks a deeper fear, the fear that we might not be capable of maintaining them. It's easier to dismiss aesthetic concern as vanity than to admit we've abandoned a fundamental aspect of our humanity, the innate desire to surround ourselves with beauty. 2. The practice of intentional living behind every harmonious environment lies a quiet revolution against entropy. It's not a battle against other people or external circumstances. It's a daily choice to resist the natural tendency toward disorder, both in our spaces and in ourselves. This resistance begins with small, seemingly insignificant decisions. The choice to return an object to its designated place rather than leaving it on the nearest surface. The decision to spend 5 extra minutes arranging fresh flowers in a simple vase. The commitment to clearing one surface completely before moving on to another task. These micro-choices accumulate into something profound, a practice of mindfulness that extends far beyond the physical realm. When we care for our spaces with intention, we're actually training our capacity for attention, patience, and self-respect. The process cannot be rushed. Authentic transformation of our living spaces, and by extension our inner experience, requires what our culture finds increasingly difficult to embrace: slowness. There are no shortcuts to creating sustainable beauty. There is only the gradual, deliberate process of making conscious choices, day after day, in service of harmony over convenience. Start with something manageable. Choose one drawer, one shelf, one corner of one room. Transform this small space into a zone of perfect order. Not expensive perfection, intentional perfection. Every object should have a reason for being where it is. Every color should contribute to a sense of visual peace. Every surface should be free of unnecessary accumulation. Notice how you feel when you look at this transformed space. Pay attention to the subtle sense of mental relief that emerges. This isn't psychological placebo, it's neurological reality. Your brain is literally responding to visual harmony with increased calm and clarity. Once you experience this shift, expansion becomes natural. One organized drawer becomes an entire dresser, one peaceful corner becomes a sanctuary room. But always gradually, always with attention to how each change affects your internal state. The discipline of aesthetic living isn't about following rigid design rules or copying magazine layouts. It's about developing your own visual literacy, learning to recognize what calms your nervous system, what inspires your creativity, what makes you feel genuinely at home in your own space. Create small rituals that honor this practice. Before leaving your home each morning, spend 5 minutes ensuring that key spaces reflect care and intention, not from neurotic perfectionism, but from loving attention. Just as you would care for your body through hygiene and nourishment, care for your environment as an extension of your well-being. Choose one color that genuinely soothes you and weave it subtly throughout different areas of your home. Notice how this visual thread creates continuity and calm. Observe how small aesthetic choices can have disproportionately large impacts on your mood and energy levels. Transform at least one daily activity into an aesthetic experience. This might mean setting a simple but beautiful table for breakfast, choosing a favorite mug for your coffee, or arranging your workspace with particular attention to visual harmony. The goal isn't Instagram-worthy perfection, it's the cultivation of moments where function and beauty intersect. 3. Transforming aesthetic envy into creative inspiration. There's a particular type of resentment that emerges when we encounter someone who lives beautifully. The automatic criticism that springs up when we see spaces that reflect care, intention, and aesthetic sensibility. We dismiss it as too much, high maintenance, or pretentious. Anything to avoid acknowledging what this beauty stirs in us. This resentment isn't really about the other person's choices. It's about recognizing our own abandoned capacity for creating beauty. It's about confronting the painful reality that we once possessed, and still possess, the ability to live with greater aesthetic intention. The criticism becomes a psychological defense mechanism. It's easier to label someone else's beautiful living as superficial than to admit that their intentionality awakens something dormant in us. Something that remembers when we too cared about the details, when we too found pleasure in visual harmony, when we too believed our daily experience was worth curating with love. But this defensive reaction can be transformed into creative inspiration once we understand its true source. The discomfort we feel in the presence of beauty isn't actually about inadequacy. It's about recognition. Our authentic self, recognizing its own unexpressed potential. The path forward isn't comparison or imitation. It's excavation, digging beneath years of accumulated indifference to rediscover our own aesthetic preferences, our own sense of visual harmony, our own definition of beautiful living. Begin by observing without judgment what genuinely pleases your eye. Not what should appeal to you according to trends or social media, but what actually creates a sense of visual rest and satisfaction. This is your personal aesthetic language, as unique as your fingerprint and as valid as anyone else's. It might be particular color combinations, specific textures, certain types of light, or particular ways of organizing objects. Whether it aligns with current style trends is irrelevant. What matters is that it feels authentic to you, that it creates a sense of coming home to yourself. Start incorporating elements of this personal aesthetic vocabulary into your daily environment. One object at a time, one color at a time, one space at a time, not as imitation of external standards, but as expression of your own recovered sensibility. Research in environmental psychology demonstrates that people who customize their spaces according to their genuine aesthetic preferences experience significant reductions in stress and increases in overall life satisfaction. The environment stops being neutral or hostile and becomes an active contributor to emotional balance. Most importantly, understand that this journey of aesthetic recovery is also a journey of self-compassion. It's not about achieving external standards of perfection, but about reconnecting with an essential part of yourself that has been neglected. It's an act of care, not criticism. It's a process of healing, not punishment. When we begin caring for our environment with this loving intention, something remarkable happens. Our relationship with others' beauty transforms as well. What once triggered resentment begins to generate inspiration. We can genuinely appreciate the harmony others have created because we no longer feel threatened by it. We know we're cultivating our own authentic form of beauty. This shift in our relationship with aesthetics has implications far beyond interior design. It affects our capacity to admire rather than envy, to appreciate rather than criticize, to create rather than merely consume. It represents a fundamental change in our posture toward life itself. Aesthetic discipline becomes a form of spiritual practice in the deepest sense. Each consciously placed object becomes an exercise in presence. Each thoughtfully chosen color becomes an exercise in authenticity. Each moment spent in conscious arrangement becomes an exercise in self-love. The effects ripple outward. A more harmonious environment improves sleep quality, reduces anxiety, enhances creativity, and facilitates concentration. Relationships benefit because we feel more comfortable inviting others into spaces that reflect care and dignity. Work becomes more fluid because minds that rest in aesthetic harmony produce with greater ease and less struggle. But perhaps the most profound benefit is reconnecting with our own capacity to create beauty rather than merely consume it. This awakens a sense of purpose and dignity that extends far beyond the aesthetic realm. Each small gesture of conscious arrangement becomes a vote of confidence in the future. It's a way of saying, I believe it's worth caring for this space because I believe it's worth caring for myself. It's a form of resistance against cynicism, carelessness, and the pervasive tendency toward giving up that characterizes so much of contemporary life. The question isn't whether you have time to care for the beauty of your environment. The question is whether you have time to live with the constant low-level stress of visual chaos, the diminished self-respect of neglected spaces, and the disconnect from your own aesthetic nature. Beauty isn't luxury, it's medicine. Organization isn't perfectionism, it's self-care. Aesthetic discipline isn't vanity. It's a pathway back to yourself, living in harmony with your space, at peace with your sensibility, connected to your capacity to create order where there was once chaos. When you begin this journey, when you take the first steps toward reclaiming your aesthetic sensitivity, something magical will happen. You'll discover that you were always capable of creating beauty, that this capacity was always within you, waiting only for permission to emerge. That aesthetic discipline isn't external imposition, but expression of your most authentic nature. This is the invitation. Reconnect with your capacity to perceive and create beauty, because this capacity is one of the most powerful ways to resist what is most destructive in the human condition, the abandonment of yourself. Beauty requires discipline because it requires truth. Truth about who you are, about what you genuinely value, about how you want to live. When you begin caring for your environment with intention and love, you're not just arranging objects, you're rebuilding your dignity, your self-respect, your connection to what is most elevated in your nature. The discipline of beautiful living is an invitation to return to who you were always capable of being. Will you accept this invitation?